I'm pretty sure that in order for a town to become recognized as a town, it first needs a ghost story. A haunted house will do fine, or a vanishing traveler. Also popular, but a bit less used in late regard, stopping your car at a railroad crossing. The track can be in use or not in use. This appears to be optional. Anyhow, you stop your car on the tracks and the ghost, always plural, will come and push your vehicle off the railroad track. Usually these are the ghosts of kids whose school bus was struck by a train. The point I'm getting at is that most of these stories get rehashed. The Pittsburgh area has two well-known ghost stories which stand out not only for their uniqueness, but also because one of them is documented in the 1938 issue of Harper's Magazine, and its origins are not some sufficiently worn-down derelict house, but a church which boasts some of the most iconic art in America. I've got two stories, and they represent the most famous ghost stories of southwestern Pennsylvania. The story of the murals at St. Nicholas's in Millvale is probably more well known outside the Pittsburgh area than that of Blue Mist Road, and the details of Blue Mist are more flexible. When I was in high school north of Pittsburgh, we would often travel to the North Hills suburbs of Pittsburgh and go to the mall, or more often in my case down to Half Price Books or the thrift stops or the thrift stores on McKnight Road. These trips would often take us through North Park, which would lead to talks about Blue Mist. There's a few stories I've heard of Blue Mist Road over the years, and so I'll try to boil it down. Essentially, there's two versions. The first version talks about a closed section of road in North Park. You can't drive your car down the road as it's barricaded, so you have to hoof it. You walk on the remnants of the road, which leads to a cemetery with an empty clearing nearby. Towards the center of the clearing is a large deciduous tree. Some people said that a lynching occurred at the tree. Some say multiple lynchings. Others say that no lynchings are known to have occurred, but that the Ku Klux Klan would gather at the spot for meetings under the moonlight. The last of these scenarios certainly doesn't seem unlikely, although I think most of these stories take place in the 20s, and it would be odd for the Klan to feel a need to gather under the cover of darkness, considering that during this era, some of the trolley parks, including Alameda Park and Butler, would actually have Klan days, so popular was the group in the 1920s. Regardless, the second version of the Blue Mist story involves a closed road still and a cemetery, not so much about the Klan. In this second version, two tombstones in the cemetery are said to touch each other during a full moon, and that's it. The only unifying connection between these two different stories and their minor variations is the name Blue Mist, and that's because in both stories, as I've heard them, a blue mist or fog is said to cover the road at night when anything freaky is about to happen. Some say it also disables your engine in your car. There's not actually a road in the area known as Blue Mist. The road most often attributed as the road is Ingomar Road. Or maybe it was a road right off Ingomar. I honestly can't really remember, but there was a time when friends and I would look for the place. One time, this search did bring about something unusual. If you were to look at a map of North Park, you'll see different buildings listed, including the swimming pool, which, when it was built, was the world's largest. What the maps don't show is the location of the Fountain of Youth. The Fountain of Youth was rediscovered, at least anybody I know, by myself and my friend Jared while on one of these random Blue Mist drives 15 or so years ago through North Park. The Fountain of Youth is so named because of a large Fountain of Youth carving on what is clearly just a spring. I imagine the reason it's not listed on the maps is because the water may be less than drinkable. Regardless, sitting on the hillside below the golf course, if I remember correctly, as it's honestly been at least 10 years, you'll find the Fountain of Youth, and this discovery fueled at least a winter's worth of inquiry between my friends. North Park is also home to a gravity road, but that's something else altogether. Growing up when and where I did, Blue mist might have been the most famous legend which was discussed among friends. Had I been older or, as other people have suggested to me, lived in Pittsburgh, blue mist would probably have been supplanted by the story of St. Nicholas's Church. St. Nicholas's Croatian Catholic Church in Millville is an active church and is on the National Register of Historic Places, not only because it's the first Croatian church in the United States built around 1900, but also because of the murals by famed Croatian artists who painted them in the 30s as his gift to the United States. Far from being Stations of the Cross sort of scene common in most Catholic churches, Maximilian Vanka's murals are very modern and depict the industrial workers of Pittsburgh, as well as armed soldiers and gas masks bayoneting Jesus on the cross. Vanka, a lifelong pacifist, wanted to deliver a contemporary message, and the church gives tours of these murals, although you should probably stick around for the services too, because it's just bad form to leave early. Maximilian Vanka painted the murals at night after the church was done with services, and here's where the legend begins. The April 1938 issue of Harper's Magazine features a story written by Louis Adamic, a friend of Vanka's, called The Millville Apparition, and this is from his Adamic's conversations with Vanka regarding an odd experience that the legend of the Millville ghost originates. Vanka, while working at the church, had requested privacy so that he would not be distracted by people breathing down his neck or trying to speak with him as he worked. So after the church services were done, the priest would kind of hand over the place to Vanka, and Vanka would work in the silence and solitude of the empty church. Adamic's write-up mentions that Vanka did feel odd alone in the church and that he would hear things, but he was so busy and nothing real gripping happened, save for one evening early on in his work when he thought he heard the organ momentarily, but again, he's engaged in his work and he's trying to churn this out. And he's in an odd place, and so he chalked it up to something completely normal, such as the scaffolding creaking, which it was doing often enough. About a week into his work painting these murals, a different sort of thing happened. Vanka was working on his murals when he noticed a dark figure below him in the church. He watched for a moment and figured it was the priest who presided over the church, an intelligent, talkative fellow by Vanka's admission, but he assumed he was going about his priestly obligations in respectful silence on the artist's behalf. The priest denied entering the church later when Vanka was working. The priest denied entering the church while Vanka was working when the two of them spoke after Vanka had finished for the evening, and the next few evenings were without event. The next time Vanka claimed to see the dark figure was pacing the aisle of the church, gesticulating every which way and doing so for an hour, maybe a little less, according to Vanka. After that night, Vanka asked for the priest's company while he finished the murals, as even though he initially thought it was just the priest again, he couldn't explain the terror which he felt, the unease as he watched this mumbling, cloaked figure. So Vanka asked for the priest's company while he finished the murals, but this wouldn't stop him from occasionally seeing the figure, even though the priest himself never did. The priest did believe Vanka, though, especially on the evening when the eternal candle was blown out. In the end, though, Vanka completed his gift to the United States, and the story of his encounter with the Phantom has, to a degree, overshadowed the historical and artistic importance of the murals themselves. This hasn't stopped some people, including some members of the clergy, from setting up cameras and recording equipment in the evening in the hopes of capturing evidence of the sad, horrifying, mumbling figure in black, as Vanka had described him. There's a darkness to the murals themselves, and a part of me wonders if, well, I'm not much of a believer in ghosts, but I don't know. Maybe it was just paint fumes. But certainly, if you look at some of the imagery of the murals themselves, there's a darkness, a sadness, a frustration with a lot of things. and it makes me wonder if these visions he was having did not influence the work of the murals themselves.